echoes of the stadium. Legends awaken!
Welcome to Broncos Unchained. I'm Boss Man Jay. And first I want to thank my beautiful wife because she's the one that puts all these graphics together. And then anybody that wants to know day by day what the Broncos are doing at training camp, go to Locked On Broncos and see Cody and Sayer talk about it, because that's where I get my information from training camp about training camp excuse me. And a shout out to Moose, the Broncos Breakdown. He gave me some pointers on my podcast. If anybody knows, this is only the fourth one I've done. Now, today I wanted to talk about a player that's going into his third year, and only at the end of last year did he really, start to turn into something. They figured out how to use him. And not since 1982 with Rick Upchurch was there a Broncos returner who kind of lit up the field like Marvin Mims does. Unfortunately, it was till the end of last year that Sean Payton figured out how to use him, but that was with a rookie quarterback, and who I'm going to compare him to today was not playing his first couple seasons with a rookie quarterback, but he was also a punt returner and an all-pro in his first two seasons. His rookie season was his second year. And then in the third year, made another huge jump. And that's what we get to look forward to with Marvin Mims this year. Both of them are all pro returners. Both of them are Pro Bowl kickoff returners. And both of them have that getaway speed that just, you blink and they're gone. So today we're going to talk about Marvin Mims, and then we're going to get into a player that's very similar to him. If you're talking about punt returners like Marvin Mims, you have to also bring up cornerbacks. The reason I say that is because the first 2 years for punt returners, kickoff returners, and cornerbacks is pretty much all the same. Teams don't know what kind of threat they are. They don't know how dangerous they are just yet. So they don't know to kick it towards the sideline. They don't know to throw the other way. They don't know yet. So people, like the top four cornerbacks in NFL history, Deion Sanders, and this is by statistics, Deion Sanders, Darrelle Revis, Rod Woodson, and then Champ Bailey. Now, of course, we got to throw, PS2 in there, but he's got a long way to go before he ends up in the Hall of Fame, but he will end up there. Now, Marvin Mims, when he came out, was considered a gadget player, just like who we're going to talk about in a little bit. He was considered a gadget player, and most people said, he can only run one route, but he's great on punt returning. He ended up an all-pro and a Pro Bowl punt returner. So it's not like he couldn't do it, we went from a god-awful situation with Russell Wilson into a rookie quarterback with a coach that had an unbelievably complex playbook. So that being said, it's a lot to learn, especially for a rookie with a second-year wide receiver who's still trying to, get his footing, gain his footing, grab his bearing, whatever you want to call it, So if you look in history, you take the top four, we'll say five, because you have to include Deion Sanders. If you, in history, go back and you take the, by statistics, you list the top five punt returners in the history of the NFL. You've got Devin Hester, Eric Metcalf, Desmond Howard, we're going to go way back, Dante Hall, and then Prime, of course. So when Marvin Mims came out, his first couple of years, he was treated like a lot of other punt returners. They would kick it right down the middle of the field, right to him. They didn't know any better yet, And Russell Wilson, of course, he couldn't throw the ball up the middle because he's too short, so thank God we have a taller QB. But all he could throw was the deep ball, and what they said about Marvin is all he could run was a deep route. So halfway through last year, things changed. Bo Nix threw, his first touchdown, I believe, in week 4, He had one touchdown and 4 interceptions through the first 4 games. After that, things changed. Right at week 5, things changed. But for Marvin, it changed a little bit later in the season. But Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and Marvin Mims got on the same page and figured out how to make him explosive and dangerous, not just in the kicking game. You know, against Buffalo, you look at that, they kicked it right to him down the middle of the field. You know, a lot of punters, we took a shot there. A lot of punters, you know, eventually they learn to kick it, you know, box somebody into a corner. They don't kick it right down the field to somebody with this kind of skill. They just don't do it anymore. You know, but it takes a couple years for people to figure that out, and it also takes a couple years for people to figure out a punt returner or a cornerback not to throw to. So we're going to talk about another gadget player for a minute. And yes, I'm going to the dark side, you know, one of our sworn enemies. But, you know, you cannot talk about Marvin Mims without talking about somebody who he could become or even surpass in Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill, when he started his career, he didn't have a rookie quarterback. And this was pre-Mahomes, actually. He had Alex Smith, who had been in the game a long time. You know, he did a great job on the Chiefs. People overlooked him. But when Tyreek Hill came into the league, he quickly gained the nickname the Cheetah. He was also an all-pro returner, made it to the Pro Bowl first 2 years. And DNVR, Zach Stevens, you know, made a podcast last year talking about how fast Marvin Mims was versus Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, you know, ran a faster, you know, mile per hour time. He hit, I want to say 22 miles per hour, you know, and Marvin Mims, you know, hit over 20, 21, somewhere around there. But both, I mean, if you look at anywhere over 20 miles an hour is ridiculously fast. Now, I don't know off the top of my head how tall Tyreek Hill is. I really don't know. But when he runs, he looks a lot quicker than Marvin Mims does, to a point, because he takes smaller strides than Marvin does. I would call Tyreek Hill, you know, more of a quick burst, cut and run kind of punt returner, and Marvin more of like a ballet dancer, smooth, subtle, and you really don't even know how fast he's going, but he's moving. And the two of these players are very, very similar. And now Tyreek's going into his 9th year in the NFL, so everybody pretty much knows who he is, and everybody pretty much plans for him now. But if you watch both of these players, the one thing that's constant, and people overlook all the time, because most of the time you think about tight ends with this stat, you got to remember the yards after contact, because every punt return, kickoff return, you have gunners on the other team, and the gunner's job is, of course, to get down the field first. But rather, look, he was hit at the 40-yard line, so that's 40 yards after contact. Punt returners and kickoff returners have great yards after contact, and most of the time lead their team in that statistics. So when you kick, you know, right down here, you kick to the 14-yard line there, and I don't think he was touched on this one, but if you kick it to the 15, the 20, and the first player, the gunner, tries to trip him up and can't, then every yard after that is yards after contact. So, like I said, you got to think about, you know, the tight ends. Well, since we're talking about the Chiefs, we'll say Travis Kelce. You got Gronkowski. You've got Mark Andrews. What's his name? Something Gates. I can't remember his name for some reason. From the Chargers, everybody knows who I'm talking about, because he was a pro. He was a professional. He was great. People think about them as in yards off of contact are big receivers, because they're the most ones that's hard to bring down. But it's also hard to bring down somebody who can just run by you with a cut. You might catch a heel, you might catch an arm, you might catch a thigh, you might catch a shoulder pad. But at the end of the day, you can't bring them down, because they're just, when they're running, it looks like you're in slow motion. So we now need to go into what Marvin Mims did last year. Last year, in this shootout against the Bengals, you know, Bo Nix found him on a deep route. I believe this was the longest air throw of the year. And people overlook one quality about Marvin Mims that I'm hoping he continues to grow. And now that Marvin Mims and Bo Nix and Sean Payton are all going into their 3rd season together, maybe more than a deep route is what they'll be able to figure out, like they did at the end of last year. I don't know if people know, but Marvin Mims, after the first 8 games of the year, after that, if he had kept up what he did at the end of last season all year long, he was on pace to get 17 touchdowns. That's good, especially when he's not the number one receiver. But one thing I want to point out that people overlook about Marvin Mims is, and you'll see it on this play, is his ability to watch his quarterback, make sure he's paying attention to where his quarterback is. And when Bo rolls to the right, Marvin goes over to that side to make sure he's available. Now he jumps up. If you look, he's double covered, but he brings the ball down. Now he's very small receiver, but he comes down with the ball. He's got incredible hands, and he can go out and grab those 50-50 balls. And I know those DBs are bigger than he is, but he still came down with the ball. So at the end of the day, Marvin Mims may not have, hit the same mile per hour, 22 plus, I think that Tyreek Hill hit, but he's sneaky fast and just about impossible to cover. And what we're looking for is the same jump from year 2 to year 3 that Tyreek Hill made. And now that Bo Nix is a lot more comfortable with his offense, and Sean Payton knows how to use everybody, especially Marvin Mims, and Bo Nix has learned the playbook a little bit more. I'm excited about the jump that Marvin Mims can make, because Tyreek Hill is about the most similar player to Marvin Mims that I can see. So let's hope this year that Marvin Mims keeps lighting up the field. And if anybody paid attention last year, the last 5 games, I think, he was on pace to hit to score 17 touchdowns if we just learn how to use him better. Now, I've seen a little bit of the training camp videos, and he looks like he's running a lot more routes. He's getting more comfortable on the field. So, Broncos fans, I've been a fan since the Elway days, and I'm not talking about the Super Bowl wins. I'm talking about the Super Bowl losses. So we've had a lot to look forward to in the Elway years and the Peyton Manning years, and now we have the Bo Nix years. So let's see if Marvin Mims Jr. can become what Tyreek Hill was for the Chiefs, even pre-Patrick Mahomes, and had become for the Dolphins. Broncos country, this has been Broncos Unchained. Again, I am Boss Man Jay, and I will see you next time.